Hi, everyone. Welcome. And thank you so much to Rabbi Sarna for joining us on this Yom Yerushalayim. I was honored to be invited to introduce Rabbi Sarna, who is someone that I've had the honor of knowing for quite some time. I think we're going on 13 years by now. First as a student at NYU, Rabbi Sarna was my rabbi. And then I had the honor for the past 5 years up until very recently to work alongside Rabbi Sarna. He is the executive director of the Bronfman Center at NYU and the university chaplain, which is a really interesting position that he holds along with the Muslim chaplain, Imam Khalid Latif at NYU. More apropos of the conversation we're going to have tonight, Rabbi Sarna is the chief rabbi of the Jewish Council of the Emirates. One of the highlights of my career has been traveling back and forth from the UAE with Rabbi Sarna and seeing the incredible community that he has been integral to the establishment of. I see Pierre is here as well, so he can attest to it. I'm really excited to hear about some of the newer initiatives that Rabbi Sarna has been working on. A lot of you've heard him speak on this topic before, but even though COVID might have shut some things down, Rabbi Sarna has been really, really busy creating new initiatives that have been made possible because of the Abraham Accords. So with that, Rabbi Sarna, I invite you to begin.
Wow, thank you for that really kind introduction. I don't have enough words to describe how grateful I am to Sarah for not just the years of friendship, but really all the hard work and creative work, specifically in the domain of helping build the Jewish community in the United Arab Emirates. And I'd like to just begin with just telling Sarah that she may or may not know, but certainly I don't think there's anybody else on the call here who would know. And then I'd like to double back and share just a few things about my perspective on how things are developing and where things may go. And I think at about 20 or 30 minutes in, be happy to take questions from you. I am at my kitchen table, so it's entirely possible that there might be children of different shapes and sizes who come through. So just ask for your patience in advance, and thank you for understanding. So within a few days of the onset of the pandemic, Sarah and I realized that things were changing really dramatically, and just like so many shuls and schools were going on to Zoom, we decided, well, maybe we could lend a bit of our Zoom expertise to the fledgling Jewish community in the United Arab Emirates, which, although small in size, has a minyan and Shabbos minyan every week, and Pierre saw it, other people saw it. And with the loss of in-person, we really were concerned that this would lead to a disintegration of the community, which is not very large. And so we started doing these services over Zoom. Sarah, for 6 months, 7 months, every Friday morning, sometimes coinciding with the necessity for carpool, would get up and get ready and put on her Zoom. And in the beginning, those Zooms, as I'm sure for many of you, were the locus where people were getting the necessary information they needed about how to get through the pandemic. It provided people a sense of support and solace, and gave people a sense of spiritual inspiration. Well, the following interesting thing started happening, which is that once we went on to Zoom every Friday morning here, but afternoon in the UAE, what we saw is that it was not only people from the United Arab Emirates who were joining by Zoom, but in fact, there were some people from Bahrain started joining, some people from Qatar, one or two people from Saudi Arabia, someone from Kuwait, that there were people from actually around the Gulf area that began logging on. And just like tonight, people log on a little early, or some people are going to stay a little bit later and start chatting and talking to each other. the same thing started happening. People actually really started getting to know each other. And when Pesach came, we did our best to ship whatever Pesach goods we could from, the Scarsdale seasons. And for me, it slept to the Lower East Side and then to FedEx. And I tell you, trying to FedEx grape juice during a pandemic when there are no flights to the United Arab Emirates, not easy, especially when I went to FedEx. They saw that, they said, you want to send grape juice, it was a tough thing to imagine, but we took orders, from people there who needed matzah, needed grape juice. And sure enough, there were people in each of the 6 Gulf states who had requested. And so the shipment went from New York via FedEx to Dubai, and from Dubai to the 6 Gulf states. Now, because these relationships started forming after the Abraham Accords, the Zooms continued, and Sarah can attest that we started having everyone who had anything to say about the Abraham Accord wanted to come on to address the Jewish community, and sometimes we had even 100 people, 200 people on these phone calls. Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, came on. It's a long list of people came on to address the crown, and it occurred, and this was an idea that Eli Epstein, who's not quite Scarsdale, but right nearby, Eli said, hey, we already have people from the 6 Gulf states. How about we come together and actually formalize that relationship? And so in January, we started something called the Association of Gulf Jewish Communities, which has on its board Jews from each of the 6 Gulf states. And we've been having these monthly Zoom events, usually around the Chagim. We started with Purim. We had about 1,000 people who joined us for Purim. We did a Megillah reading, but also, a conversation between one of the ambassadors from one of the countries and an interlocutor, an Arab interlocutor. And we've been doing these, monthly events ever since. Through this, we've also been providing, just this past Pesach goods to the various U.S. military bases that have in total about 500 Jewish people, and help them with the Pesach Seder, et cetera. And so it's quite amazing to see not just what kind of opportunities and possibilities and connections have opened up as a result of the Abraham Accords, but also of individuals' actions. So I just wanted to make sure to thank Sarah for all the amazing work and all those early Friday mornings for waking up and helping connect people. Now, I'd like to describe to you in just a few words how I got to be doing the work that I'm doing. And I know that's today's Yom Yerushalayim, Shavuot is around the corner. I still have such fond memories of being able to come to the Young Israel Scarsdale for Shavuot. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. And this amazing time, I think it was a Yom Tov lunch at the Fredmans, and I think I had a very late night dinner at the Jasons, and it was just so wonderfully hosted by your community. Maybe I can describe how it is that Sarah and I came to do the work that we were doing, some of the key steps along the way, and then really what are the keys to unlocking the greatest potential and what might come. And I'm going to share this. It's largely optimistic, and even though I know we've all been checking the news today and seeing the rockets and other unrest in Jerusalem, and even though of course there's major concerns now, we don't know what's going to be in the coming hours or days, certainly in Israel. But from a macro perspective, I think there's great reason for optimism. I see also Bob Hoke is on, and the Hokes that hosted us. That's where we stayed at the Hokes when we were there for Shavuot. Thank you for your hospitality. So I originally got to the United Arab Emirates about 11 years ago, in January of 2010, before NYU, which has campuses all over the world, before they opened NYU Abu Dhabi, I was invited to go and and to help interview students who were being flown in, high school students, flown in from all over the world to interview. They had to interview at NYU Abu Dhabi if they wanted to go to NYU Abu Dhabi, because the design of it is not as a study away site where people go for a semester, but actually a 4-year college. And can you imagine being a high school student coming from a country where not only had you never met a rabbi before, Jewish person before, but never even heard of what Judaism is, because really that was the effort, to try to create a world's honors college. I got a note here that the audio is spotty. Is that for everybody, or that's just for one person? Okay. And the day before I left, I said, "Hey, where is this country anyway?" I had no idea. I had no idea. And then I looked on a map and I see its proximity to Saudi Arabia, to Iran, to Yemen. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I doing? And even though up until that point, I had been engaged in interfaith activity and fighting anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, somehow setting foot in an Arab country for the first time was a very jarring experience. I remember being in a supermarket, French supermarket called Carrefour, with the Imam, Khalid Latif. We went together, and I was looking to see if there were any kosher products. I remember I was in the dairy section, and they had Philadelphia cream cheese, and I was like, "Oh, I wonder if Philadelphia cream cheese here has an OU." So I'm there in the cream, and then Khalid Latif says to me, "Can you wait here for a second? I just got to run to a different aisle." I said, "Sure." Then all of a sudden, I had this experience of feeling like, oh my God, I am alone in an Arab country. And it's hard to explain, it sounds irrational, but the surge of fear that came over me at the time, it was almost like I was certain that I was going to become a victim of a terror attack there and then, or I was going to be kidnapped. And this was coming from somebody who had the most open attitude, who was always standing up, not just against anti-Semitism, but also against Islamophobia. And in that moment, it made me realize that just how deeply set my stereotype of who Arabs are, what Arab culture is, and how alone I could feel in that moment. Anyway, I had an amazing weekend interviewing these students from about 100 different countries. And I was my eyes were open to a different model of Arab nation than anything that I had been exposed to before, not just exposed, seen with my own eyes, but exposed even through media. I'd never, ever seen a country like this, which really exhibited a different model of Arab identity, not the kind of Arab identity that is rooted in Islamism or political Islam or a theocratic Islamic state, not the kind of Arab identity that is rooted in anti-colonialism, anti-Westernism, but a kind of Arab identity that is rooted in the history and heritage of Bedouin hospitality. That the idea of hospitality and openness is at the very core of the identity of the Emirati. So going back year after year, 2015, 16, I met for the first time the Jewish community, small Jewish community in Dubai, a neighboring emirate, about an hour and a half from Abu Dhabi, the capital, which they started having a weekly minyan in someone's home. I went to their house, I met 20 people there. I was going to give a shir, each person from a different country. It was Hanukkah. I talked about where the Chanukiah belongs, inside or outside the home, depending on how comfortable people feel being public about their Jewish identity. The conversation erupted into the broader conversation of why are Jews here? Where are they coming from? What has brought them here? How comfortable they feel? How comfortable their children feel? Can they be public about identity? What are the risks, security, social costs? And what do their kids say when they're in school? Do they disclose? And it was just a riveting conversation. So I kept in touch with this small group of Jewish people. And sure enough, in 2019, as the government, it seemed like, was more and more willing and more, not just willing, but also eager, shining a spotlight on bringing the Jewish community to light among other religious traditions and nationalities, that they asked me to serve in a rabbinic capacity, and I committed to go 4 times a year, and so from there I began. Now, Sarah and I both, we thought that this was going to be a relatively small scale project. We did not realize where things were headed. And you'll notice I always say Sarah and I, because really we built this together, and I'm forever indebted to the work that we did and that she did. So I come back from my trip to the UAE, and I'm asked to speak on a panel at NYU about this, the pluralism in the UAE, but there they call tolerance. And on the panel is the lead Protestant minister in the United Arab Emirates, who kind of came over for this panel, and the ambassador, the UAE ambassador to the United Nations, Lana Nusseibeh. Now, some people might be familiar with the Nusseibeh name. It's a Palestinian name. The family is from East Jerusalem, And Lana is moderating, and we each of us tell our story, a few stories, and the Reverend Andy shared this beautiful story about celebrating Easter while a friend of his told him that they were saying Hallel, and you have the muezzin in the background, a very ecumenical moment. And I talked about the needs of the developing Jewish community and the fact that this was the first Jewish community to be established in the Arab world in over a century, and just how bold that project is, and how unique the conditions were in the UAE, that Jews on their own start moving there, both for sense of safety and also prosperity, decided to move. And after the panel, Lana says to me, my father is originally from Jerusalem, and our family history, the Nusseibeh family, 800 years ago, when there was a fight between several different Christian sects over who gets to control the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, one of the major holy sites in Christianity, in Jerusalem, in the Christian quarter, the Church of the Holy. All the Christian groups were fighting over who gets to control it. So they said, you know what, as a compromise, let's give the keys to a Muslim family, and they will safeguard our church from our internal battles. And that family was the Nusseibeh family. And to this day, the Nusseibeh family holds the keys to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So she says, my family understands, we understand what it's like to safeguard the ability of others to practice their religion. And if there's anything that you need to help the Jewish community in the United Arab Emirates flourish, just let me know. 2 weeks later, I get an email from Lana saying that the United Arab Emirates was chairing an event at the United Nations headquarters, and she wanted to know if I could speak. What was the event? The OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation. That's the forum that 56 Muslim majority countries are members of. Famously, that bloc voted against Israel on most issues. 56, 57 Muslim majority countries. So she says the UAE is chairing this event. It's going to be lunch May 3rd at the UN headquarters, the 4th floor, not in the cafeteria, a side room in the cafeteria. The Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is coming for the occasion. And we want the theme to be religious tolerance. And we're going to have the permanent representative from the Vatican, the Holy See, is going to speak, and the chairman of the OIC. And we thought maybe it would be good to have a few words from the rabbi give about 5 minutes. My guess is that it will be all representatives, every country will be represented, and it will be the ambassador rank, even though in the 47th or 48th year, sometimes like the kind of people a little bit lower down, but we assume it's going to be the ambassador rank. So I remember speaking to Sarah. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to say? I have this 5 minutes. What an audience, 56 Muslims. And I get into we walk into the 4th floor of the UN headquarters. You remember this, right, Sarah? You remember this? And I had a whole speech prepared. And then I realized that day, May 3rd, 2019, was also Yom HaShoah. Coincidence, maybe providence. So I walk over to Antonio Guterres, who I never met before. Certainly he did not know who I was. And I said, Mr. Secretary General, can I just talk to you for a second? Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. He said, yes, I know. I said, do you think I could talk about the Holocaust? He said, not only can you must. So Alana Nusseibeh opened. She told a little bit of her family story. The Nusseibeh is Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The representative from the Holy See said a few words. Antonio Guterres, as he was about to speak, because it was his 70th birthday also, they brought him a piece of chocolate cake. Everybody started singing happy birthday to you. The Saudi ambassador says, Mr. Secretary General, we just want to bless you. In our tradition, we say, until 100, may you be happy and healthy, but I see the rabbis here, I'll give you another 20 years. And then he spoke, and then it was my turn to speak. And I felt in that moment that the right thing to do was not just to talk about anti-Semitism and not just to talk about Holocaust Remembrance Day, but to offer a viewpoint of standing up against hate through a Holocaust memory, but in a way that everyone could connect to. So I told the story of one branch of my wife's family who were saved in Berlin by Dr. Mohammed Helmi, who is to date the only recognized Arab righteous among the Gentiles, and many Muslims, only Arab righteous among the Gentiles recognized by Yad Vashem. He was recognized in 2013 after he passed away. And he saved my wife's great aunt by producing fake conversion documents to Islam, and then counterfeiting a marriage document between her and a relative in Egypt so that she might get an Egyptian passport and then through that be able to escape from Nazi Germany. And shared this story as I put this story on offer as a way for everyone around the table to connect to the story of the Holocaust, but also as a way of connecting to the kind of our loftier, nobler spirits of really standing up against hate, regardless whom it's directed towards. We walked out of that room at the UN headquarters, actually in disbelief. In disbelief. What an opportunity to address 56 ambassadors, Muslim majority countries, and I realized in that moment that this role was not just about serving the needs of the 40, 50 Sholem eaters who were coming to Shul every Shabbos, but in fact there was a platform here which needed to be explored and a responsibility to explore. Let me just fast forward to bring us to 2021. Abraham Accords come in August 2013. It was on the White House lawn in September. Sorry, that was August 2020. It was on the White House lawn in September of 2020. I actually decided to wear a talit because I wanted to. For me, it was not a political event. For me, this was a spiritual event. to be able to bear witness to the to what was occurring, and then the work of bringing of really building the kind of platform which could help, not through political channels, not through government to government, but through people to people efforts. For me, that's when that began. So at this point, the whole strategy in building up the Jewish community was not just to create a space where as many people as possible felt like they could belong, but also to try to build the Jewish community as a platform for people-to-people engagement. United States, Israel, other Arab countries, other people coming from Arab countries to the UAE for all different kinds of reasons. And we also, that's around that time we began thinking about, okay, this association of Gulf Jewish communities, how can this be not just about the UAE, but about other countries? And we also continued to think about the Holocaust. I was just there I went 4 times this year with my family. Rosh Hashanah, went for Sukkot, went for right after Hanukkah, and went for Pesach. Pesach, when I was there, we had a few Emiratis come to our Seder, hundreds of people for the Seders. And one of them, his name is Ahmed Al-Mansouri. He runs a museum, a small museum, started as a private collection. This museum is called Crossroads of Civilizations. And Ahmed says, you know what, I have this whole museum with a lot of rooms. I think I'd like to clear out one of the rooms and create a Holocaust exhibit. Can you help me with it? No. I said, it's a wonderful idea. He says, okay, but I want to do the opening. I want to do the launch for Yom HaShoah. I said, it's a pretty tight time frame. He's like, no, I have 2 very good people who work for me. They're Israeli. I said, what do you mean they're Israeli? He introduces me to Yael and Ben. I said, how did you hire Israelis? He says, very easy. My museum opened. People know I have a letter from Theodore Herzl. They know I have a copy of the Balfour Declaration. So we're getting all Israelis are coming through. And every Israeli comes through. They look at my museum and they start giving me advice. Why is this picture over here? Where's the explanation for this thing? So 2 people came in. They start telling me how to run my museum. I said, listen, you want to change it? You come here, you work it, you change it. And so sure enough, he hired 2 of them. One of Yemenite origin, the other one Ashkenazi. And he put them to work basically, 24/6 over the next week now to try to put together an exhibit. And we also worked on an event for Yom HaShoah, which was going to be the first public Holocaust commemoration. There were several firsts that Yom HaShoah. Of course, several people did it in person. And so in a way, bringing it full circle, I actually recommended to Ahmed that the ceremony and the exhibit highlight and tell the story of Arabs during World War II, not just Helmi, but others, who stood up against the Nazis. There's a book by Robert Satloff, which tells many of these stories, but they are not the only stories. And that was the lens through which now subsequent to that event, at that event and subsequent to it, many Emiratis are now being exposed to the story of World War II. The majority of my focus right now is on youth, because I see this transformation not as it's not a switch that you flick, but it's the work of a generation. And so I've been working very closely with the Ministry of Youth Affairs in the UAE, Shama Al-Masrouri, who is NYU Abu Dhabi alumnus. At one point was the youngest minister in the world. She started when she was 23, right after her Rhodes Scholarship. And just truly visionary. When she spent a semester in New York, she met Jewish people, invited them to their house for Shabbat. And so she kind of is familiar with Shabbat and, kashrut, and she knows really the basics, quite amazing. And we've been able to work together on creating several youth encounters online between Israelis and Emiratis. The most recent one, the first one happened in late November, early December. There was one meeting that occurred between the UAE Special Olympics and the Israeli Special Olympics. And then just this past Sunday was a meeting between the UE Federal Youth Council and the National Union of Israeli Students. And that work is ongoing. The other thing that we've done is I pulled together a group of educators and scholars to try to create an educational vision for how Israeli, Emirati, and American Jewish youth can come together. And we've just published a few articles, put them up online. I can share it with you in the chat. And what we hope is that these provide a roadmap for any youth group, delegation, who's looking to go to the UAE, not just to go skiing in the indoors or the tallest building in the world, but to really meet and engage with other youth. And I'll share that on the chat as soon as we go to questions. So, but there's a lot of work. I mean, in a way, what's happening now, Yerushalayim, this is, and the rockets and the unrest, especially around Har Bayit, the Temple Mount, it's going to be a test. We knew that this kind of day would come. I would say it is a test. In my view, the real challenge here is not how to get businesses together. Businesses are motivated, of course, largely by expanding markets, finding, there's a self-interest in, very powerful self-interest in business. And both the UAE and Israel, know how to do business. So that's not my concern. And anytime, I think I have thousands of Israeli friends on LinkedIn, friend requests on LinkedIn. People are looking for access. What's the way in? But I've not stepped anywhere near the business. I've also stayed out of the political arena. I do not weigh in on political issues, but my focus is really on the people to people, because I think ultimately, when you have relationships between people, and people understand each other's narratives, ambitions, hopes, talents, on a massive level, that's when you have something that's truly enduring, and it's not, and the kind of the strength of an agreement is not dependent on overlapping interests, only on overlapping interests alone, whether those are foreign interests or business interests, but there really is a shared understanding. And the way many Israelis will term this, because of their experience with their most immediate neighbors, where there's an agreement between governments and between militaries, but not really an understanding between people. They refer to those relationships as a cold peace, but when it's come to the UAE and Bahrain, they're referring to it as a warm peace. And so much of the work that I'm doing is under that label. So you'll see the URL that I'll share with you is called the Warm Peace Institute. I think at this point, I'd like to open up for questions. You should feel free to, ask any kind of question that you have. It'd be my delight.
Yes, thank you. Everyone, please feel free to write the questions in the chat, and Rabbi Sarna can answer them. I will take prerogative, because I can unmute myself, and ask you directly. You spoke about the importance of young people and the engagement and the possibilities there between Israelis and Emiratis and Jewish and Arab youth. And you also said that your children have traveled 4 times only this year. I know that they've been there even more than that. They're all students at SAR. What has the experience been like for them? What are they learning and bringing back to their peers in the modern Orthodox Jewish world?
Well, 2 of my kids are at SAR high school, and they are in Arabic class. And I think because we have gone as a family before the Abraham Accords were signed, and we've gone obviously since, they can appreciate the difference in environment or tone. My kids, whenever I'm there since 2010, my boys were always wearing yarmulke and tzitzit, as we would here in New York City. but the difference was palpable. When we came through after Abraham Accords, at customs, we were greeted with, Boker Tov or Laila Tov or Shalom or etc. Whichever, Erev Tov, I should say. Wherever we were, there's it actually took us about an hour to get through customs, not because we're being held up, but because with each of my kids' names, biblical names, Hebrew names, that people who were looking at our passports say, "Oh, isn't Moshe like Musa, etc." Couldn't resist. So, as well as the hotels and I mean, especially December, it was ridiculous. December, there were 8 hotels in Dubai which had set aside one kitchen as a kosher kitchen, and mashgichim, flown in either from Europe or from Israel. Every hotel lobby, you heard Hebrew. You walk along the Dubai Creek, you see Hasidim, and on the beach, you hear Tel Avivis. I mean, 70,000 Israelis in 1 month, about the equivalent of 1% of all Israeli Jews visited during that 1 month alone. Now, so they've seen the difference. And my 9-year-old said to me, Abba, right after the Accords were signed, each had our own reaction. My 9-year-old said, Abba, you used to be the chief rabbi of a nothing. Now you're the chief rabbi of a something. That was his line. But I think they have a sense that they too are part of something that's really historic.
Great. So I see we have some questions coming in. You spoke briefly about having a lot of Israelis in your inbox for business. Have you been getting, Carol wants to know, has anyone in the UAE contacted you about what's happening right now in Israel?
I've not received any outreach. And so I don't know. Let's see. I mean, not yet. I think I've been pretty clear in terms of what my role is. I don't represent the Israeli government. I don't represent the United States government. In the UAE and to the UAE, I represent the Jewish community of the UAE, and that's my positioning. But I've had no phone calls up to this point.
Harold wants to know, could you talk a little bit about the Jewish community in the UAE? Who are they expats? Where are they from? Who is it that decided to live in the UAE?
Well, it's a good question. It's become more complicated. I used to be able to say that they are all expats, which is no longer true. Since the change in the citizenship rules, there is actually now a Jewish Emirati family who has received citizenship. They've been living in the UAE for about 15 years, and have now been granted citizenship, UAE passport, and did not need to give up their previous citizenships. So it used to be that, they were all expats from all, and they still are mostly expats from all over, many different European countries, and also the UK especially, and France, Switzerland, Belgium, United States, Canada, Argentina, some people coming from Hong Kong, former Soviet Union, Israel, people from all over. And they were coming basically for 2 reasons. One is a sense of security, because it is a very safe country, it's a very well-run country, and prosperity. So the combination is quality of life is very high, including for Jewish people before Abraham Accords. And before the Abraham Accords, it was people would come and then stay, and then decide to stay even longer. And some people come and go, come for a few years and then leave. But there definitely is an absolutely increasing number of people who are coming and making their life there.
It looks like we have 2 more questions, so we'll do these 2 and then wrap up. Steve Smith wrote that Pew recently found that 97% of a random selection of people in several Arab countries had an unfavorable impression of Jews. What is the impression among people of the UAE, and what educational and other sources help them form that impression?
I've not seen the Pew statistic, and polling in the Arab world is famously difficult to do. So I can't speak about that Pew study, but I can tell you about my own impressions. There were significant changes to the UAE curriculum, textbooks, etc., over the past 20 years in particular. And well before the Abraham Accords, there was no like venomous anti-Israel stuff in the textbook, and certainly none against Jews. But nevertheless, for people who were in schools 20 or 30 years ago, I think they probably were educated in a way that was not favorable towards Israel in particular. The Emirati will say that they've never had anything against Jews, and that has been my experience. Israel does, and probably will continue to evoke some feelings of negativity among some. But my read, from what I talked to a lot of people, my read is that there's basically there's 10% over here, 10% over here, and 80% in the middle, where 10%, if you would have asked them, should the Abraham Accords occur, they would have said no, and are probably still opposed. And then there are 10% who are feverishly in favor and exuberant, and those are the ones who are eager to travel to Israel or going on social media and are active in many of the cross-cultural initiatives that are going on. And then there's 80% in the middle. And those 80% are basically adopting a wait and see. They have the approach of, why would I need to be first? And they know that that the direction is in a certain way, but they're adopting a wait and see approach. They're not per se jumping in. I would not expect massive tourism from the UAE to Israel. There've been over 130,000, probably at this point, 150,000 more Israelis who come to the UAE. I would be surprised if it was more than a few hundred Emiratis who visited Israel. Some of that will have to do obviously with COVID policies, but I don't think it's just that. First of all, there are fewer Emiratis than there are Israelis. But even with that, I think most are adopting a wait and see approach. But among Israelis, this is kind of euphoria. But the idea of creating a warm peace with an Arab neighbor, I mean, doesn't get better than that for many Israelis.
Thank you so much. I think you've answered everything, so I'm going to hand it over to Rabbi Klinger to end the evening.
Okay, thank you so much, Rabbi Sarna, for joining us tonight, for sharing all your experience and expertise. And we hope to be able to next time host you in a live setting. And nothing would be better for us than that. A big thank you as well to Steve Smith for helping put this together and making the connection and setting this up, and a huge thank you to Sarah for being our moderator tonight. When I was just coming back from the Sheva Brachot of Simon Morgenstern and Lauren Bornstein. A big shout out to you, Rabbi Sarna, from Rabbi Morgenstern. And
Mazel tov on the wedding, by the way. Mazel tov.
I will pass it along to the rabbi. Thank you all for joining us tonight. On Thursday night, we're going to have a pre-Shavuot shiur as part of our kicking off of the collective conversation for Sefer Bamidbar. And that's going to be with Shuli Tavis, who is an amazing, excellent Tanakh scholar. She teaches at SAR High School. So please join us 8 o'clock on Thursday night for that amazing shir. And please check out later this week the email with a full schedule of our Tikkun Mal Shavuot program. For that, so that I think that covers everything I wanted to share with that. Again, big thank you to Rabbi Sarna and to everybody who helped make this happen. Have a good night, everybody. Be well.